Hello, my name is Victoria Rivera and I'm a wellness psychotherapist in New York City, and welcome to Mental Health Wellness Wednesday. So today we're going to continue our topic on acute mental health treatment for COVID-19, and this is part 4, understanding disgust. We inadvertently talked about all of the core feelings, so that makes sense, right? It's funny because I didn't really think about it like this, but we talked about anxiety, and the physical manifestations and emotional and psychological manifestations of anxiety, which comes from the core feeling of fear. We talked about anger, the core feeling of anger, and how that gets acted out either outwardly or inwardly towards yourself. We talked about the core feeling of sadness last week, which gets acted out as grief, and how there is a kind of collective grief, and we went over the grief and bereavement cycle. And today we're going to be talking about disgust, which is a very interesting core feeling, mostly because people don't really understand the feeling of disgust and why we have it psychologically. So I think it's worth looking at it first physiologically and biologically, behaviorally, to understand it psychologically. So you have had a bad apple, a bad strawberry, or some bad food that you put in your mouth and your nose like wrinkled, your eyes narrowed, your lip curled up, and you spit that crap out. You're like, this is disgusting. Why do we have that? Well, we have it because it's something that is viscerally within us to take care of ourselves, right? It's expulsion of something that is not good for us, that our bodies recognize, sometimes immediately, sometimes not, that there's some pathogen or something in there that is going to make us sick and potentially kill us, right? Again, all of these feelings are really about what is going to kill us, what's going to help us to survive. I don't make this stuff up. This is like evolution and like evolutionary psychology and biology. And if you look below, there are sources to this. For me, it makes the most sense in terms of understanding our psychology and why we do what we do. So understanding that core feeling of disgust is a physical reaction to something that's not good for us, right? So if you look at it psychologically, it's actually a behavioral immunity. So they call it the behavioral immune system, meaning that we are much more likely to stick with things that are like us in our in-group that we're familiar with, because if we do, then we're less likely to be exposed to pathogens and other things that are not good for us. So for example, like if their human race is as varied in terms of colors and hair and textures and everything. And if somebody looked different than what you looked, or looked different than your peers, then that potential person could have some pathogen that you don't have an immunity to. And so you are more likely to get infected, as the other person is just as likely to get infected with something that you have, right? So that's the thinking about why there are these visceral reactions that people have when somebody or something is different from them, that feeling of disgust gets triggered. It also gets triggered when we are something happens and we feel like that sick to our stomach kind of feeling, that disgust feeling of like, oh my God, I can't believe that morally that person did that, or that they would even think of doing something like that. And a good example of that is, when you hear about these mass shootings, you get a visceral feeling, a sick to your stomach feeling, a disgust that somebody could think about doing that and do that to hurt other people. So it makes a lot of sense that we have this feeling of disgust. The issue is, just like with all the other core feelings, is that when it gets kind of misconstrued, we can hold on to what that feeling might trigger for us, that it might inadvertently not be helpful for us. So what do I mean by this, right? Well, kind of what's going on now with COVID. A lot of times, you go outside and there's a feeling of that person could have COVID and I don't want to be around them. I don't want to be near them. I have to protect myself. And, look, it makes total sense. This is a deadly disease and it's highly contagious. And so it makes sense that we're having that kind of experience, that we don't, want to be close to somebody because we don't want to get that. But what it inadvertently does is it also pushes you to maybe not smile, or maybe to feel a certain kind of way that's more angry about, like, somebody not wearing a mask or somebody not wearing gloves, or feeling like, that they're not adhering to social distancing. Like, it's helpful. It's a behavioral immunity response, but it could also bring up and trigger feelings of anger. It could trigger being judgmental. It can trigger feelings of moral superiority. It could trigger feelings of, like, uncleanliness. And again, that's the core feeling of disgust that gets triggered. So what do you do about that? I mean, it's just like with anything and any of these feelings. It's like the reality, right? Checking in with yourself about how you're actually feeling. Are you feeling that feeling of disgust? Why are you feeling that feeling? And, what is the reality of that at this point? One of the interesting things that I've noticed in my practice, and particularly with couples as I'm working with people as they're trying to, like, manage, this whole current system and circumstances, is that feeling of disgust is getting triggered. So they might not want to be hugged or touched or anything, and they are pulling away and pushing away. How I see that is really that, we as human beings also need a bit of space, and we need to have boundaries. And sometimes when we don't feel like we're getting those boundaries, or we don't feel like we're having that space, and we feel like that's being encroached upon and impinged on, that feeling of disgust can get triggered, and we just want to, like, protect ourselves, and we just want to, like, push away. So it's not a pathogen, but it's more of a protective factor to kind of keep our sanity and to be able to feel a little bit less anxious, a little bit less angry, and a little bit less sad too. So that's kind of how the core feeling of disgust may be getting acted out. If you want to, you can share how it might be getting acted out for you. Thank you so much for watching these. I really appreciate it. We will be moving forward in the mental health treatment for COVID. And we'll talk actually about that other core feeling of joy and of happiness, and how we can cultivate that a little bit more, especially during this time. Thank you so much. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I will see you soon. Bye.